that, okay, tell me the facade pattern, tell me the flyweight pattern, or tell me the proxy pattern. That like tons of design patterns, right? And it's difficult to remember. It's not something history or geography that you have to remember each and every line of the code and understand and tell them. It's more about applying it. So they might ask you, have you ever applied any design patterns in your working experience so far? And it is very difficult that you say no, because even though you haven't written that code, but inherently you are using that, right? So if you're using Spring, you definitely inherently you are using Singleton factory and all that. If you're using any library for Kafka client and all that, you're using observer or command pattern kind of thing, right? You are building CLI commands, you're using a command design pattern, right? If you are using something like a cache or something, you might be using a proxy design pattern. If you're using something like applications where you can have a different setups, like if you're writing a HTTP client where you provide different headers, there we use something like a decorator pattern or facade pattern, or suppose flyweight pattern. So even though I want to have a DB connection, okay, and this particular class will be responsible for setting up a DB connection and giving me the object to it, so that I can call it from the main method. I can use it from my main method, and I can go ahead and use it. Now, as this is a DB connection, it's a DB factory connection. If there are multiple clients who wants to get that DB factory, they should be able to get it, and we should not be creating it, because it's a DB connection, right? It's something which anybody can go ahead and use it to connect it to DB and execute their SQL query. So there are 10 people, or there are 10 threads which want to connect to DB and execute a select command. They should be able to do it parallelly, and we should not create 10 different DB connections, right? It doesn't make sense at all, right? So what do we do? We create a Singleton class. So which class we need to make? Singleton DB factory class. How do we make it? Okay, now that question is to Muralidharan. Can you tell me, Muralidharan, how do we make this class as a Singleton? I'm waiting for your answer, Muralidharan, if you're speaking. Okay. Anybody else wants to speak up? Subrat, do you know how do we make it?
Make the constructor private.
Okay.
And create a static instance of the class, which can be accessed outside.
Okay. Yeah. Just switching on the fan. Okay, so right now, yeah, you're right, Subrat. So currently the challenge is, suppose this is the connect method, and then it will do all the initializations and will connect to the DB, and then public void secure query. Okay, so see, the current challenge with this approach is, now if I need to connect to the DB and execute my SQL query, I need to create the object of this, right? This is the normal way. If I need to do it, what I need to do, I'll just do a DB factory, new DB factory, and then DB factory dot, I'll say connect, and then DB factory dot execute query. Let me make it more realistic. It will return DB factory object, maybe the connection object, whatever, and then return this. Okay, so this will give you the same object here. I know it sounds a little differently, but I'll just trying to say that we are trying to get a connection object, right? And then what it will do is it will basically create a new object every time, because whenever you use a new keyword here, it basically gives you a new object, and then you try to connect and get some. So it could be something else. I'm just using the same object name, but you can return something other DB object or repository or whatever you want. And then we do connect this one. Now, this is one of the main method which is trying to invoke that connection and execute the query. Now, some other thread wants to do that. Then what they will do, they will also create another object and do the same thing. But does it matter really that we should have a different types of objects here? No, right? I mean, it can be the same object and we can invoke the connect method, or we don't need even the connect method. The connect method will already be called once. Once it is connected, the object is ready. We should be just able to execute the query every time. So the connect should only execute it once, and then whoever wants it, they should just get the object and execute the query, right? So let's see how can we make this work. Okay, so let me just make it the static class. So let's see. So what we will do is we will prevent the client or the other classes to create the object directly. So right now we are able to use this db factory equals to new db factory. We will stop them from using it. We'll make sure that they don't able to execute this particular new instantiation. So the way we will do it is we will mark this as a private db factory. Now, as soon as you make this, right, what we are saying that what happens if you're not familiar with Java or C++, the thing which happens is when you mark anything as a private, right, this is a constructor. Okay, so the constructor, anytime when you create an object, basically while creating the object, their constructor calls basically when that is the object creation flow, that you can have a constructor overloading, you can have a argument based constructor overloading as well, but this is the default constructor. So even though you don't give it, by default Java will take it or C++ will take it as a default constructor. But if you want to override with private this one, by default that will be public. So I am making it as a private. Now in that way you will not be able to create or you will not be able to use new keyword. So see, if you see that now it started giving me error and it tells that this has a private access in this one. So you cannot create the object. So this line will not work now. Okay. Now, if this doesn't work, how will get the object of this? If I want to execute, see, my intention is to execute the query. Okay. This connect should be only executed once when we actually make a DB connection and it should be done. So what we will do, we need to provide a mechanism through which we can provide the object to it. So we will be creating only one. So what we will do, we will provide the object using the public static db factory get instance, and then this should give the object. Now we'll define here db factory so this db factory is what we need to initialize with. Okay, so what we will do is here we'll check that if this equals to null, then equals to new db factory. Now, okay, else and return let's put db factory. Okay, now what are we doing here, right? So we are providing and yeah, so when we create this one, this will basically once again this will call this method connect. Okay, so when you create this object for the first time, it will call the connect method, and the connect will connect the all the db connections and everything done, and that's it. It should only be called once. Now whoever needs the db factory object to execute the query, they will simply call this get instance. The get instance will do one check that for the first time it will be null, because the db factory hasn't been initialized yet, right? So it's basically a null value. So it will be null and it will create the object. And if it finds that, okay, fine, I know it has been done, then it will return that object. So from next time onwards, this will not be null. So this will be executed only once. Okay. So here also, let me put the Okay, so and any question in this code, what I've written so far, guys? If anybody has any confusion, feel free to ask.
This private, right?
I'm sorry,
Connect
will be private.
I didn't get your who was speaking in between?
Hari speaking. This I'm talking about this connect method.
Huh.
That can be private, right?
Yeah, correct. Sorry, yeah, you're right. Yeah, they should not be called from outside. You're right. Yes. Ram, you were saying something, or who was speaking before that?
Yeah, I was saying that same thing actually.
Okay, got it. Okay.
So for file reading, I use this, but I don't know what that pattern name actually. For config files reading, we use like this only, like because the file will not be changed, right?
Yep, that's what I was telling. The file and all that, we use it mostly that places. Okay, we'll come to that. Now there are a lot of things will go on. Like we'll see that it's not done yet. Okay, a lot of things will come in the Singleton design pattern right now. We'll discuss it. That's why I started with this topic, so that you don't take design pattern for granted. There are a lot of other things goes inside that. Okay, so now we are good. We should be able to connect the DB and all that. Let's see that how it works. Okay, so what we need to do is we need the DB object. So DB factory is equals to DB factory dot get instance. We cannot use new because of that obvious reasons, and dot execute query, right? And we'll try one more time. The second time, it should not do connect and all that. Okay, so let's see that. What happened to my Java? Undefined Java virtual could not make. Okay, what is this? What am I missing? Main app. So it says that the DB object is not initialized, creating it, connected to DB, and all init is completed, executing the query. But on the second iteration, when I executed again, it didn't do all these two. Why? Because the object was already created. It was connected. It just did the executing the query. Okay, so our purpose is achieved, what we wanted. So whatever multiple times I do it, it will not go ahead and create the different objects. Okay, so far good. Is this enough? Now that is the question to you guys. If anybody is aware of that, is this implementation enough to complete our work? Is design pattern is completed, or is there still any challenge here? Anybody can speak if he knows or if she knows that there is still a problem in this code. Nobody? Amar, do you know?
Threading, like in case of multi-threading, like different threads, right? This will create a new object.
Yes. So the current implementation will fail miserably in concurrent environment. Okay. Now we have given a hint. I want somebody to speak of what kind of problem it will be. Mukesh Singh, what do you think that what kind of problem will it will pose in?
Suppose there are multiple threads and one first time entered the DB factory personal, and in the same time some other thread came and this will initialize and it will directly return that time.
Yes. So in multi-threaded environment, it might happen, and it will definitely happen if it is a 1,000 threads are trying to get the object. There is a high probability, there are high chances that you will end up creating more than one object, even though we are using singleton design pattern. Now the question is how, right? Assume that there are two threads which are trying to invoke this at the same time. Okay, get instance method, and one thread has done a check here that if db underscore factory equal to null, and that time it was actually null. He said, okay, fine, and it just did the check, and it was kicked out of the execution mode. From the running, it went to runnable because of I already explained you that multi-threading concept yesterday itself, right? So that particular thread had done the check, and it knows that the underscore DB factory is null. So with that memory, it went into the pool and waiting for their another allocation to the execution point, and so that they can start from here. So that check was completed. So the first thread T1 was knowing that, okay, fine, this is done. Now the second thread which comes, again, second thread checks that, okay, fine, DB factory is still null because nobody has created the object, and it went ahead and created the object. That's fine, no problem. It has created the object and it returned the object, and it's fine. The second thread went ahead. Now the first thread which has done this check will not do this check again because this check was done. Till line number 12, the execution was done by that particular thread, the T1. What T1 will do, it will print this and it will create another new object, and it will use that object in order to